This wasn't really what we were expecting.
What was?
Well,
We expected the American cards to warp. We didn't expect the European cards to warp in such a quick way. But even Prophecy, at certain experiments, warped. Well, it's of course logical because it's paper and paper bends when it gets wet, right?
do you want any chips though?
No, crisps.
Crisps?
I don't want chips. I want crisps. Chips is fried.
Yeah, but on the back
No,
it says chips.
Yeah, well, this it actually is. Chips. It's like French fries in a bag.
Yeah.
So let's start with the ones from the freezer first, because they are actually the ones that are still frozen. Well, Dennis, maybe you can get a secondary camera. Get my cell phone.
Your cell phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you can film with 2 cameras. Okay. So these are from the freezer. This is Belgian 2, right? Belgian 2. It's always American. Well, I actually do it the other way around, right? Of je moet de HD-camera pakken.
In HD-camera?
Shall we switch roles? You sit over here and I stand over there.
Here, let me help. What's this?
Wow, it's a touchscreen that doesn't work. But maybe it's not a touchscreen. Maybe it's just. But these.
Oh, there we go.
Oh.
It's not a touchscreen.
It's not a.
Using it as a touchscreen all along.
Okay, let's get started with the ones from the freezer. We didn't expect a lot from the freezer because the cards get frozen and there is a humid atmosphere, but let's see. I always start with the American one first, then we get to the Belgian one, the one from Rivals of Ixalan, then we get to Prophecy, and then we get to Rivals. Well, you can see that all cards are bent, are warped, and that's logical because there was a lot of moisture there. But you do see that the American one is a bit more, but the European one also is quite warped, right? Prophecy is warped but less, and Revised is also a bit less. So that's why I also did a second bunch of cards. Let's start with the American. Well, let's get this from the table first. We start with the American ones. Right, double check. Yep. American 2. Then we get to Belgium, or European cards, 2. Then we get to Prophecy. And I hope you can see this. And then you get to the Revised cards. Well, as you can see, the Revised cards are warped as well. So that means that even the saturated cards were warping. So that actually means that we should expect all the other cards to warp as well, and they do. There is a lot of difference, although you do see that the American cards are more warped than the Belgian ones, but even the Prophecy cards warp a bit. So we can say that the American cards are a bit more warped, but not really that big. The difference is not that big. Okay, let's continue with, I think this is the most interesting one. These cards are from the study room, which means it is the average space where we would keep our cards without any sleeves. So again, we start with the American one. You see that this one is already less warped because there was less moisture. Then we get to the Belgian one. Then we get to the Prophecy card. And we finish with the Revised card. So as you can see, the American card is a bit more warped than the Belgian one. The Belgian one is a bit warped, but not a lot, so I wouldn't mind this kind of warping. The Prophecy card, I don't notice a lot. I think there's a very slight warp, but I don't think it's a lot. And the Revised hasn't changed a bit because it was already a bit bent. I don't think that is because of the warping in the room, which was to be expected because these are saturated cards, which means not pack fresh. They've already been exposed to a lot of air. So then we get to the sleeved cards. So we normally would sleeve our cards because we want to keep all the cards nice and tidy. So this is the American card, this is the European card, this is the Prophecy card, and this is the Revised card. You see that the American card is a bit warped, even in a budget sleeve. The Belgian card, European card, is not, well, it's slightly warped. Prophecy card hasn't warped at all, and the revised card, don't expect any changes there. Conclusion for these cards, because these sleeved cards have also been in the study room, American cards, these American cards, warp a bit more than European cards, although the European cards also slightly warp. Now we get to the foils, because we had 3 foils. And the funny thing is, these have also been in the study room. There isn't a lot of change, a difference between these 3 cards. There is some warping, but it seems as if the Belgian card is a bit more warped than the American one. So people always say, well, the foil cards warp the most. Well, actually, in our test, the normal cards warp more than the foils, which is really weird, because foil cards warp because you have the plastic layer on top of the paper layer. So you would expect that those cards warp more. But even the prophecy card warps. But as you can see, there's not a lot of difference between these 3 cards. Sorry?
The middle one is a bit warped.
Yeah, and this is the Belgian one.
It is warped.
It is warped, yeah, but it is to be expected because they are foiled cards, right? So let's get to the bathroom cards. And these bathroom cards are more interesting because this would happen to ordinary cards if you would just leave them on your shelf in your study room for weeks, maybe months. What would happen to them? And then you see some heavy warping. This is the American card, right? This is warped a lot. But let's have a look at the European card. This one is also warped a lot. Right? We get to the prophecy card, which is warped, but it's less. Right? So if you have the Belgian one, American one, prophecy from Europe as well, also Cartamundi, but it's warped less. So let's have those next to each other. This is a modern European card. This is a card from the year 2000, right? So there is a slight difference. There's a huge difference. It gets warped. It is paper, right? So paper doesn't like water. So it should be warping a bit. And then, of course, we get the prophecy card, and even the revised card. But even the revised card gets a bit warped, not a lot, because it's saturated, like I said many times before. So we only expect the effects to be less.
But it's still less than an European.
Yeah, so it's still less. So this was the old days. These are modern days, which is, well, different. So I discovered this after a week, that the difference between American card and the European card wasn't really a lot. So what I did after 1 week was to actually have more cards there and see what happened to the other cards, because these are only 2 cards. So what happened to the cards that were only for a week in the bathroom? They are bent differently because I put them upside down. So they warped in a different way, so don't get confused by that. This is the American 2, which means that it is actually the second bunch. So these are the American cards. And also put them upside down, because then you can actually see what happens. So these are 2 American cards after 1 week in the bathroom. And we are a family of 4, so we shower a lot. And we also dry our wash there. So, but then we get to the Belgian cards. This is Belgian 2. And they're also warped in the same way. So let's put them next to each other. American 1, Belgian 1. There isn't a lot of difference there, is there? So let's have a look at prophecy. Again, this one is actually the most warped. So this is really weird. This is not what we expected, right? So in the study room, prophecy cards banned less. In the bathroom, they banned just the same as the modern cards. Let's put them next to each other. Prophecy, modern European. And then we get the revised cards, and even the revised cards are banned. Bit less, as expected, but still they're warped a lot, right? So if you put this next to each other, you wouldn't even notice the difference. Strange, strange, strange. So, we cannot come to a conclusion here because they are all warped. So, more investigation might be needed to actually come to a conclusion here. Let's get to the fridge. So, we already saw the cards from the freezer. Now we get to the fridge. So, we start with the American one. And these were not upside down, so these were with the image up. This is the Belgian swamp. Then we get to the the prophecy, and we end with the revised. Now, as you can see, this American card has a weird bend at the top here, and you see that more often, that these American cards sometimes have this strange band in the corner. I don't know what that is. But the European card is also banned. So let's put them next to each other, maybe upside down. Right, so they all bend. It seems as if the American one is bent a bit more than the European one, but they're both warped. Even the prophecy card is warped. Right? Let's put them next to each other. Modern Belgian, Old Belgian. Both Cartamundi, both warped. And the revised card, a bit warped, but not a lot. So also with the fridge testing, I had in the second week another bunch of cards to see what would happen to them. So we have, oh, this is Belgian. I love that I indicated that. This is American. This is also American. So these are a bit less banned because they were 1 week less in the fridge. But they are also warped. Right. Then we get to the modern Belgian ones. Or should I say Flemish? So you couldn't say the difference between Belgian and American cards, right? So these are actually quite the same. They're both a bit warped, not a lot.
Hold on. What was that?
What was what?
If you keep them in front of each other, you can actually... It's breathing.
Ah, this one, yeah. So this one has... That's a good one, Dennis. Yeah, but this is also... Then you have yeah, absolutely true. Yeah, so it seems that if all corners are a bit warped, so it's more difficult to see. Yeah, so the American one is a bit more warped than the European one. Yep. Then we get to the prophecy cards. And they are warped less. Not a lot less. Slightly less than the modern ones. So again, old Cartamundi, new Cartamundi. Yep. Yeah. See that?
It's breathing.
It's breathing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this one is not. Right. So let's put the American one next to that. Oh, so it's the Belgian one. I love this. American one.
So the new ones are breathing more.
I'm trying to bring it back to life. Breathe! Get to life now! And this one, either it's stone dead, or it's still alive. So these are not actually warped. Well, now we get to a more interesting thing, because these are also breathing. And these are the revised cards. So that's weird. right? That's strange. But so again, we cannot really come to a certain conclusion. So, but it's something that you have to keep in mind. There aren't really a lot of differences from the fridge as well, just like the bathroom. The real differences that we saw were from the study room, but not from these very humid areas. Okay, so almost there. Let's get to the car. We had some rain, so the car had quite a humid atmosphere. Again, we start with the American cards first. It's warped, so don't keep your cards in your car. They will get warped. But let's have a look at the Belgian one. And it's also warped, but it's less. It's less warped, still breathes, but less. Right, so you can actually see that the American card is warped, especially there. So how about Prophecy? Seems also warped. Bit the same as the modern Belgian one, which is annoying because it even gets more confusing. Also, it's breathing. And then we get to the revised card. And actually that one is, well, it's not really, it didn't really bend. So that's interesting. That pack fresh, it bends, old cards, but the revised card doesn't.
It's confusing.
It's confusing. The results are very, but also that makes it interesting. That's why we said beforehand, we are doing science, although we try to do a scientific approach, which actually means if you want to test the warping of American and European cards, you have to make sure all the variables are clear. You have to use several cards to see how the results are. And you should do several rounds because otherwise you get very different and confusing results. So actually what you should do is have maybe 10 or 50 cards in one study room and just let them be and just go back for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks and then see what happens. So we can draw some conclusions already, but let's have a look at the final ones. Again, I also had a second round with cards for the car, just like the fridge and the bathroom. So this is an American 2, and this is an American 2. So they're both breathing, as to be expected. 1 week in a car, they are warped. These are Belgian cards, modern ones, also warped, but I think they're slightly less warped.
Maybe slightly less.
Yeah, they're bent. They have less of a U shape, right? So the American cards have definitely a very huge U shape there. But the Belgian ones are starting to get that shape, but aren't really there. So they are a bit behind. So that could explain that the card quality and the paper quality isn't that much better. It seems to be a bit better, but not a lot. So, but maybe it's just barely enough just to not let them get warped in a study room. So let's put them 2 cards next to each other. So this one is a bit higher. Yeah, so. Right. So how about the prophecy cards? How did they fare? Well, here they are. Slightly warped. I would say it's less than the modern Belgian ones. So let's put 2 next to each other. And this also next to each other. These are slightly warped, but not a lot. Yeah, definitely. The prophecy cards are better than the Rivals of Ixalan. And they're both from Cartamundi, right? So they're both the same company, and they're both from Europe. So this one breathes a bit, but this one is definitely more bent. Okay, and then we get to the revised cards. Barely a warped. They look bent, but they already are a bit bent because they're not pack fresh,
No.
right? So they already went in a bit bent, but they're not really, because then they would also bend a bit more if they would also be bending because of the moisture. So, conclusion of the card. It seems that the American cards warp more than the European cards, although it's only for a slight amount. And your prophecy cards are also warped, but are a bit better than the modern cards. The last one. This is outside. Like I said, we had some rain, we had some sun, so these are really had all kinds of weather conditions, right? And this one has the card that's warped the most, and this is this card. So this is an American card. It's heavily warped, right? It's paper. You hang it outside. It should do something.
Can you show to the camera for proof? The other side, the A.
The A. Oh, sorry. Yeah. American. Yeah. By the way, there is a slight damaging at the top because that was still the placeholder. And as you can see, this is the Belgian one, the modern Cartamundi.
Can you show it as well?
Yeah.
The B.
The B. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what it strikes me that this is a very neat U shape, right? This one is more deformed, so it seems that only one corner was affected, but the other one wasn't. Then we get to the prophecy card. There's a weird shape. It's not really the perfect U shape. Again, it seems as if one corner bends a bit more than the other. So I think that the quality is slightly better than the American one, but not a lot. And then of course we get the revised card, which is also slightly it's bent a lot. But this is what happens when you put cards to rain and sun and wind and what have you. We even had some freezing temperatures. So again, after a week, I already saw that this might get a bit confusing. So I had a second bunch of cards in there. If I can get them out. Okay. So let's clear the table. So let's start with the American ones first.
Show it as American.
Yep. American 2. So less bent because they were 1 week less outside. And they're warped, but not a lot. Then we get to the Belgian ones. These are less warped. I don't know if you can see it, but I felt it, right? You can put two next to each other. Right, so this is the Belgian one, American one. They seem to be a bit more bent than the...
So it's a U shape versus a...
Yeah, well, if you look at this, it gets this beautiful U shape, right? And it doesn't seem to appear with this one.
It has two or different... Like with this one, it has like the opposite corners of each other.
Opposite corners. Yeah. Seems like in the European cards it tends to bend at one corner, and the American one just
folds in. Like
folds in. Yeah, absolutely. So that's interesting. That actually could say that this is different paper. So you really can't really say, well, is this a better quality paper? Maybe, but what you can say, if the paper acts differently in the American cards and the European cards, then the paper is different. And you could say that the paper is different. Okay, well, let's get to the prophecy cards. And they are, I think, a bit less than the modern European ones, but not a lot.
They took a lot of damage though.
They took a lot, yeah, at the top, yeah. But otherwise, they'll be blown away, right? So we had quite some storms here.
Oof.
Yeah, the revised cards. That's weird. That's strange. A lot of warping and bending here.
Look at the difference from those two, right?
Yeah. That's why I had to have more cards. So if you're going to experiment this on your own, make sure you have enough cards, because there might be differences between the cards, because maybe where you've placed them, maybe because at that certain spot the conditions were just slightly different to have a different effect. And that was not the purpose of this video. The purpose was to see if there was a really clear difference between the cards. So what can we conclude? That the outcomes are different. So what we can conclude is that the American cards, when they warp, they tend to have a U shape, like this one. So this is a typical American warped card, right? So it tends to go like a U. Right? So that's what an American card does. The European cards, the modern ones, but also the prophecy cards, they tend to warp differently, like from two corners into the center. So they tend to contract, right? So it's more like this, whereas the American cards tend to be like that. That's one conclusion. So when we expose these to very extreme conditions, like the moisture in the bathroom, where the humidity is really high, outside or in a car, then almost all the cards warp. The prophecy cards tend to warp a bit less, although there are examples of warping cards of warping prophecy cards, even some warping revised cards. So in these extreme conditions, you don't see a huge difference. So when you look at the study room cards, you see that the American card bends and warps a bit more than the European card, although the European card also has some slight warping. The prophecy card, as we say in Dutch, is flat as a pancake, and also the revised card doesn't show any real difference from its initial state. But even if this were science, then we have to conclude that one research, one investigation doesn't conclude anything. Science means that you have to repeat the process, the testing process again and again, and then we can come to a certain conclusion. So if you want to find out if American cards or European cards American cards bend more than European cards, then don't just claim that on Twitter, but go and do some research, see what happens. And I know for Americans it's more difficult to get European cards, but even if you would just be testing American cards and you'd be very clear on the conditions, the amount of time, the humidity, and just see what happened to those cards. Europeans, on the other side, have a different, have it a bit easier. Make sure that you buy a bundle, because these are all American ones. And then, of course, you buy either booster box or boosters from a booster box, pre-release kits. These are all made in Europe. And then you can really test them out, and you can actually put them next to each other. Use a lot of cards. I didn't have a lot of room to have lots of cards being placed, but when you open a pack, try to put these cards in a place next to each other, make sure there are a lot, and see what the results are. The more results we have, the clearer it might be. I read on Twitter that one person said, well, there's a rumor that with Dominaria, Wizards of the Coast has changed the paper quality, which seems only logical, because from Dominaria onwards, they have made some differences in their distribution. Right, so first we had one large set and a smaller set. Now they only have Dominaria as a large set. And we also have the core set coming back. So that means that decisions have been made to make some changes. And they might have decided that the quality of the paper will also increase after Masters 25, in other words, starting with Dominaria. We can only hope that the quality of these cards will improve, because it is a card game. It's a tradable card game, and you want to have the highest quality possible. So, American cards warp the most. European cards warp as well, but less. Prophecy cards also warp, but even less than the modern European ones. Revised cards, we can't really say a lot about them because they were already saturated, but that's just to see what happens to paper when you expose it to a certain kind of humidity. So that is the end of our story, but maybe yours will begin. So at the start of the video, we actually did some openings with some amazing rares and even a mythic. And we said that you could win these cards. How can you win these cards? Well, share this video on Twitter for the upcoming month. So that's up until the 1st of May 2018. And then you will actually can win this prize. Don't forget to put the hashtag MTGWarped in your Twitter link so we know who has actually shared the video. So if you like this video, just press the like button and Dennis will put it somewhere here or there or whatsoever. Do forget to subscribe because we're not going to do any more videos. We don't have a Patreon site, so don't look for us there. And we hope you liked the video, and we'll see you on Twitter. Start onderhand. Zou leuk zijn als er foil in zit. Nee, fijn niet.